possible. So good evening. This is our first class of Master Gardener training. I'm David Lott. I'm the Extension Horticulture Agent or Educator here in North Platte with the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. I serve a 16-county region from Cherry County straight south to the Kansas and Colorado borders. I'm also overseeing the training for the Panhandle region, and we have some Master Gardeners from South Dakota joining us. So we're glad that you are with us tonight and for the entire year to participate in classes and share. So this is a new format for all of us as we're doing more of a hybrid type teaching because of COVID. We do have lesson restrictions where we can have people in the room to a percentage here in person in North Platte. So we're glad for those behind me. So if you see people in the background, we do have a few people in the room. So I've started the recording and I wanted to share with you the schedule. This is the schedule for the entire year. I will send this schedule out to you with my contact number. My cell phone, magic cell phone, gets all the messages, or the office phone number.
Yeah, because this lamp, I end up being.
This has the schedule. So these are the topics that we're going to talk about. Once again, classes are on Tuesday night. They are 7 o'clock Mountain, or 7 o'clock Central, 6 o'clock Mountain. I will set the classroom to be open so you can join early. So you can join the class 30 minutes ahead, and as you join, I'll admit you into the room. So that's why you do have the chance to come in early if you choose. So we're going to talk lots of different pieces. It's going to be a little bit different, thankfully, not just a set of Zooms or slides on a PowerPoint, but some actual demonstration and some show and tell. So we want a vigorous discussion, so please unmute yourself and ask questions along the way, or you can type questions in the chat box. You're welcome to type in questions and watch as well, or you can unmute yourself and just ask. So this is what the schedule will look like on every Tuesday night. If you cannot make it, I'm going to record this class and all classes. They will be uploaded to YouTube, and then I will send your YouTube recording out the next day or so for you to watch. There is a short 9 or 10 question follow-up quiz on the class. This is for the Master Gardeners who are doing the class for Master Gardener training. If you're watching it under just the online $20 format, you don't have to take the quiz, but the idea is to help you understand concepts from each class. And as you take the class and you take the quiz, then that counts as a piece of your final. One of the options is I could do a short quiz after each class and then no final, or you can take a big final at the end of the year. So I'm just putting it together so you can do it one class at a time. So class quiz is going to be true, false, or multiple choice. And it will not be some abstract, weird question that was brought up in class. It's going to be, these are what we call take-home messages for you to learn and remember. And then at the end of the year, I will send out a list of all those questions and all those answers for you to have to put in your notebook in your own reference library. So gives you an idea. So I also can tell if you take the class and you take the quiz after the class, then I know you've completed it. So that's really important. That's one way of us being able to be accountable for watching a recording. So if you don't make the in-live class, then you can watch the recording and I know you at least took the quiz. This is an on your honor format, but we hope that you learn the key concepts from each class and retain the information. So here are the classes. And anyone have any questions on any of the topics? By late April, everyone will be ready to be outside, and I don't blame you. I want to be outside too. And some of us will be outside earlier than that, but that's fine. And then we resume in October as a fun set of classes. These are the classes that were selected by our Master Gardeners last year, and topics that we thought would be beneficial that add to the curriculum that we have to follow with the university. So I will send this out in the email with your recording next class. So you'll see it tonight, and then you'll get to have a physical copy in your inbox coming up very shortly. So without any further ado, we will go to our handout. So your handout is the Nebraska Extension set. And I promise you, this is the only slide set of the evening. Okay, can everyone see their slides? Okay. So one of the questions that we get for the Master Gardener program is what counts for your hours when you participate in Master Gardener trainings? So that is something that we always get asked, and so it's always a good thing to have available to explain ahead. To be a part of the Master Gardener program in Nebraska, you take the classes and you're gaining the education from extension educators and specialists from primarily Nebraska and other states. It also allows you to have the opportunity as a certified volunteer to be able to give educational service hours back to the Master Gardener program and help strengthen Extension's presence in your local community. So the idea is to attend the classes and the activities and the events. So the classes and all the fun stuff, all the learning opportunities, and then we help plan, develop, create, and teach educational opportunities wherever we live. And with the advent of the distance technology, that allows us to be able to do that a little easier. So we have virtual programming, we can do virtual demonstrations, we can present from one point of the state, clear over on the other side of the state now, which is wonderful. One thing that will never be changed is the camaraderie, like Julie Jacobson noted earlier this evening, is the camaraderie of everyone being together and sharing their knowledge and their interests, and a lot of good fellowship. And fellowship is one of the things that drives Master Gardener. We want it to be fun. We want you to have a sense of collegiality and for people that can call on each other. And some very good friendships have been built over time. We also have the ability to help determine what are the educational and the volunteer programs are, and then how we can develop those in your community as you go out and start collecting your educational hours. So it's not something where we're going to teach you and then expect you to float on your own. I will help each and every one of you if you need it to get ideas for programming or things to do with your local community. And for those who just started Master Gardener training that are taking the full training, I have sent correspondence to your local lead educators and your local extension office units, so they know that you are taking training, and for them to be able to contact you for opportunities to volunteer. There are two different ways to gain your initial certification in Nebraska. There is a 1-year option or a 2-year option, and I have chose to do the 2-year. You can complete your year in one, you can complete it in 1 or 2, but I have extended it so you can do your 2-year. So the first year is 40 hours of education and 40 hours of volunteer service. And you pay the initial, it's 180 now, so I need to update the slide, but $180, which includes your manuals, which is the whole entire Master Gardener training manual set, the turf grass notebook, and also the pest management and landscape book that was written by Dennis Farrar, which is really good and worked with Cornell University in New York State. So that's why it's more expensive, because you get a lot of books and materials. You get your first Master Gardener shirt is in that fee, and your name badge. And your name badge looks just like the UNL extension badges that the educators and the county assistants wear. It'll just have your name on it. So it'll say your name and extension volunteer Master Gardener. The second year, the 2-year option is to complete your 40 hours of education and 40 hours of service in 2 years. You can break it up. So if you get 20 hours of education and 10 hours of educational service the first year, you can complete the balance of those hours your second year and you'll get your certification. And your second year, you only have to pay $20. And that includes your fees and your class materials for the entire year. So that one fee, that big fee, the 180, is only for your first year when you gain all your books and your shirt and your name badge. After that is a simple $20 bill. For veterans who have received their initial certification, you have 10 hours of education and 20 hours of volunteer service per year to keep your certification. We count all of our classes as 3 hours in length, regardless if they are truly 3 hours or more. They average about 3 hours a session, so we're just going to count them as 3 hours per class. Makes it a lot easier on your end to manage that. So we just count it as 3. So for a returning veteran Master Gardener, basically you'd need 3 classes and maybe 1 session of Backyard Farmer on TV, and then you're good to go. Many of our returning Master Gardeners and our veterans will participate in just as many classes as our new Master Gardeners. So you will see them many times throughout the training season, or they can pick and choose which ones because they have received their initial certification. If you are a lapsed Master Gardener that stopped being active in the program for a time, you can come back to the program and complete your 10 hours of education and your 20 hours of service, educational volunteer service, if you are certified. And all you have to pay is $20. If you did not complete your initial certification, we will go back and look at which hours you're missing, and you can complete your 40 hours of classroom time and 40 hours of educational volunteer service to get your certification. So you do not have the double jeopardy of paying that $180 again. You paid for it once, and after that, it's only $20 a year. Educational hours in general. They expand your personal knowledge. They include all areas of horticulture or related fields. Related fields could be plant pathology, so plant diseases, entomology, which is insects, sometimes agronomic crops, rangeland, forestry, foods and nutrition, food safety. All of those areas will count towards the program. So it is not specifically a horticulture class. Those related fields all melt into the Master Gardener program for educational hours. If you work with youth, for instance, we have several that are active with the 4-H programs where they live, or they're helping with a school program. Anything related to youth development will count. We have had Master Gardeners in the past work with residents and nursing homes with their activity director. And that activity knowledge of gerontology will also count as well. So it's one thing to have your technical knowledge in horticulture and related fields, but you need to have that piece of understanding ages and stages of development from birth to grave. So if you are working with young children, it's important to understand youth development concepts. And so professional development in that area will count, as well as working with adults. Adult education will count, as well as gerontology for our elderly population. The classes and the topics are relevant to your personal history and your interest, and the classes will rotate on a regular basis each year, so you're not going to see the same material. Every once in a while, we may review a class or a topic every few years, just as a refresher course for our veterans and for those coming into the program, that they're getting this review or this new topic covered and review for everyone else. You can also do research on individual topics above and beyond the topics that we are presenting, as long as they are something that matches the mission of Master Gardener and your knowledge skill set to do any of the volunteering that you plan to do. So here are some categories that are recognized in our reporting system when you report your hours for the Nebraska Master Gardener program. Anything related to the statewide Arboretum or any of their programming that they may offer. Some of you may know that the Black Friday of plant sales is the end of April every year at the Lancaster Events Center in Lincoln. That is called Spring Affair. That is a wonderful opportunity to pick up some great plant material for that. That's the fundraiser for the statewide Arboretum. They also have a specimen greenhouse on East Campus in Lincoln where you can go and purchase plants, and you can talk to them every day of the week, 365. If you wanted to talk to Bob, he's more than happy to help you on plant materials and what may be ready, from trees and shrubs all the way down to some annuals, mostly perennials and biennials on the shorter side, and some annuals. But we have a variety of good, nice plant material available for sale at the Arboretum Tree Farm and Nursery. Anything that is UNL distance or on-campus credit. So if you take any classes through the university, distance ed or on campus beyond Master Gardener, you're welcome to count those. Any program with Nebraska Forest Service, Julie noted that with, there's some tree care workshops that are available, and I will post those up on email where you can see the classes and that they're coming up. So they will be available for you to sign up. There may be some fees accompanied with some of these extra programs. Please pay those fees, but you'll count those hours for education. So that's perfectly acceptable. Initial Master Gardener training, that's the topic that we put all of our new trainees under, is initial training. We have other UNL sponsored programs, so anything related locally to you with the university, you are an ambassador to the university as a Master Gardener, so that you're allowed to count that. Backyard Farmer is our team that is taught on NET, Nebraska Educational TV, on campus with some of our horticulture specialists. And it's a call-in show where people will talk about timely topics and then answer questions that come in. That is live on Thursdays, and you can watch it live, or you can go to the NET website and watch back editions of Backyard Farmer. So you're welcome to do that. Those count for 1 hour each in length. Any industry programs, so if you go to any field days related to the National Turfgrass Association or Nebraska Nursery and Landscape Association or the Nebraska Arborist Association, those are professional organizations. You can do that. I'm sure they have those in South Dakota as well. you're allowed to participate in those and count those. If you go to any local home and garden shows, that also counts for hours.
Is there a member garden club? I mean, that's-
Yes. We have conferences such as Master Gardener Conference. If you go to the International, which is offered on odd years, I do not know if we're going to have a conference this year yet or not, but usually it's in wonderful places rotated around the country, and you meet about 1,000 or more master gardeners from across the country in a way to really get to connect with people and have a lot of fun. We have other state Master Gardener conferences or field days. So I have spoken to the group up in Rapid City last year and had a great time presenting. So that counts as well. So it's a wonderful opportunity. Other programs, and I forgot, I was remiss, I did not add Federated Garden Clubs of Nebraska. So if you are a member of the Federated Garden Clubs of Nebraska or South Dakota, we're in the same region, we're in the Rocky Mountain region. You can participate in those educational programs and count that as well. So volunteer hours in general. Our volunteer hours should contribute to the mission of the Master Gardener program, that it's sharing correct educational material with the public. So it's not something coming off of Wikipedia or eHow or some gardening magazine from a very removed part, far, far away from Nebraska. Sometimes Midwest gardening, or some of those come from Ohio, Indiana, Illinois. That does not apply to us because our conditions are so varied, unless you can pick out pieces that you know specifically will work in our region. So we want to make sure that we're giving sound advice that is knowledge-based and primarily USDA or extension or a professional field. We want to be able to improve public spaces with an educational component. So if we're helping with field days, or we're helping with a demonstration garden and we're doing the correct signage and taking care of plants so they're healthy looking, so the public can see good examples, that is one of the goals of the program as a volunteer. If you like working in demonstration beds, not everyone likes to do that, so you're not required to do that. Build an educational partnership with organizations in your community. So maybe you would like to serve on the local tree board, or maybe you've been asked to serve on the Park and Rec board because of your knowledge of horticulture related to gardening or public landscapes. That is great. Maybe you're connected to one of the service organizations that would like to ask for some advice on specific projects. That is great too, because we would like our name out in a positive light with our community, to know that Master Gardeners are an active part of their community and are a good, knowledgeable source of information for our region. To also coordinate any programs with our extension faculty locally or across the state or across the region, because many of our Master Gardeners do have a very good relationship with our extension faculty, and many of us know you by first name basis. That's part of the fun, and we hope that we can build that professional relationship of having a lot of fun, sharing a lot of knowledge, and for you to add to the mission of our work and reaching a people of all ages. So whether you're working and helping a daycare build some programming, or helping teach activities to preschoolers, clear on through our elderly set, that is wonderful. We want to reach people of all ages and abilities in the program. And then the last thing is the biggest misnomer about Master Gardener, is that we are not personal gardeners for other people. We get questions of, well, you're a Master Gardener, can you come prune my fruit trees? That's not the idea of the program. The idea for you is to share the information. You can demonstrate the information, but you are not labor for someone else. If you want to do that on your own time, and you can do that, but remember the mission is educational and not literally doing the work for someone else on their private property. Here are some categories for our current volunteer hours. So we have youth projects, and we try to break those into different sections. So helping at State Fair, there is a state horticulture judging contest. There is a state FFA horticulture judging contest as well, or regional, where we have helped in the past. If you help at the county fair, be a superintendent in a department, whether you help take in exhibits or write comments with the judge, or whether you place ribbons or display the judged examples, that's a great example. Some have also judged county fairs. So if you like to be a county fair judge in the field of plant sciences, that is a perfectly acceptable category as well. If you help with your local 4-H activities as a project leader, or maybe you teach a specific lesson on something in plant sciences that the 4-H educator and staff would like to offer, you can do that. Or anything else related to plant science that will contribute to the body of knowledge for the 4-H program. Also, you can help with local groups such as Scouts or Boys and Girls Clubs. That would be a great opportunity. Many times they have badges that they need to receive training on. And for those members to receive their merit badges or certificates. So I've helped do that in the past, and I've had Master Gardeners also do that training so they can gain their hours that way. In general, here are some community project categories. So if you help with the community vegetable garden, we have some community gardens in the region. Whether you are helping start a new one or whether you're helping with an established one, give technical information, that is perfectly fine. And we really appreciate that and encourage that. If you help with the demonstration landscape or garden, we have had people work on the gardens out at local museums or parks where there were signs placed with all the plant materials, as well as the handouts. So maybe you had different beds of plants and a planting, and the Master Gardener created a plant list of what the information was, and participants could take it when they visit the local park or the bed. So that works. Educational teaching is a topic where you are literally teaching a program to another audience. Maybe you're speaking at a civic organization. Maybe you're speaking at a church group or another volunteer group. Maybe you are co-teaching with an educator or extension staff. That is great. Also, we need to be able to count our planning time. So for those who have been in the teaching profession, you need to do your plan and your prep, and your plan and your prep counts in your volunteer hours, because the program just doesn't create itself. You have to be able to design it with the audience in mind, with the correct information, and then teach it. If you help with any school gardens or school landscapes around the buildings on school properties, you are welcome to do that. If you have any projects that other nonprofit groups in the community would like you to participate in, one example would be our food pantries. If you help with that, with the food pantry garden project here in North Platte, or the one in Sydney, there's one in Sydney, there's one in Scotts Bluff. So those are examples of another nonprofit where you would be working with those folks, coordinating with them on which vegetables to grow and when do you get the produce there, and making sure that there's enough produce so it can go into refrigeration. All those logistical things to make sure that you're interfacing well with that group, for instance. And then there is another community project, which is the all of the above. If you don't fit in one of these, you'd put it in the other category. The other one is related to UNL and related to extension, and specifically in state of Nebraska. If you help answer the phone at the extension office, or if you help with an Ask the Master Gardener table or booth at a local county fair, a local festival, farmers markets, lots of different opportunities where we set up a table with materials and you can hand out and you can answer questions. That's great. Program management, that comes where if you are someone that would like to help organize the program with me, such as taking inventory of all the tools in our shed where we keep all of our supplies for our garden, that would be program management. If you help double check to make sure everyone's got a certificate that claims that gets all their hours in for their certification, if you help me line up all the notebooks and name badges, those are those kind of things. So they're kind of clerical and organizational, but you get a sense of what it's like to run a program, and I'm happy to share and I'm happy to teach that side of the program to you. If you are writing for publication, we have some master gardeners that write news column articles or do radio spots on the local radio station. That counts. And you're representing extension in that light. If you're helping collect research data and there's research going on in your community or area and it's related to the university or extension, that counts. Anything related to the Department of Agronomy and Horticulture, which is our home base on campus, that counts, whether it is on campus in Lincoln or if it's outstate across the state. If there's something related to another department that would apply, so something in youth development would count. For an example, once again, anything related to the statewide arboretum. So if you're actually helping with an event with the statewide arboretum, if you serve on the statewide arboretum board, that counts. Same thing for Nebraska Forest Service. Or if there's any other project that UNL or Extension does that you can benefit the project with your presence and your knowledge, that will count. So we have that other catch-all topic as well. So there should be lots of different ways to volunteer. And if you need help technically on designing something or whether if something counts or not, educational hours, we can definitely do that. And I will help you through that process. The next sheet is our volunteer log sheet. And there is a paper copy that I can send out again on email that you can print off. This is just for you to write down, jot down what you have done for educational and volunteer hours. And then make sure that you count how many males or females, if you do any volunteering, how many educational adult contacts you had, how many youth contacts you had, how long volunteering was, or how long was your education. And then the miles section, just cross that one out. We do not count that anymore. So cross that last section off. The reporting system is the next one. We talked about that. There is an online reporting system that you can put your hours in, or if you want to just put them on the sheet, you can put them on the sheet and send them in to me. I will manually put them in. But here are the links to both of those programs. One, to get started. If you've never started your own profile in this program, this is the link, and follow that. It'll show you step by step how to start your own profile. And then to log your hours, this is the link here. I have a video of this that I did last week. I will resend it to our new master gardeners. So I will send it out again. You can watch it and it'll show you step by step how to log in. But here's some screenshots of what that program looks like, where you log in and your password. And if you miss your password or lose your login name, you just click, you forgot those, and it will send it to you so you can reset it. The next page is where you can add your volunteer hours or your educational hours. This is a screenshot where you would click on either one and you would add those. So here's the educational activity homepage where you click add an e-activity. So that would be like taking a class tonight. Then here's the next screen. You would pick out the date of the event, your name, the county. So the county would be Lincoln County for all of us, Lincoln County, Nebraska, and then the activity. You do not have to do anything for sites. Skip that one. That is specifically for Douglas and Sarpy counties. The number of hours. And these drop-down boxes will show you the categories that you can put your activity in that you learned from. The number of hours, you click insert, and then it starts it over again, so you can add another entry. This is what the volunteer activity form looks like. Once again, the date, your name, your county, your activity, site. Once again, we're going to skip that one. That does not pertain to us. The number of hours and the number of adults and youth that you interacted with when you volunteered. This entire section on the volunteer reporting system is on another video, and I will send that out for any new Master Gardener or returning Master Gardener to watch. So you are welcome to watch that, and it's step by step under the new format, so that's easy to do. Okay, so this is my contact information for the extension office here, 348 West State Farm Road. The office number is the 308 area code in North Platte. The cell phone number is still my old Kansas cell phone number when I moved here 10 years ago. So that's me. And you can count on calling that or sending a text whenever. So if I'm out of the office, we have to share our time in the office. We cannot be at full capacity through the pandemic. So part of the days I'm at home working or I'm out in the field. So please call or text that number. If you call the office, Vicki or Emily are our office managers. They know where I'm at and they will catch me. So if all else fails, call the extension office and they'll track me down. And so that is the end of that section. And we're going to take a 5 to 10 minute break if that's okay. And we'll get our coffee refilled and have a bathroom break. And does anyone have any questions into the bale? So I forgot to record, hit the record button, but we need to make sure the pellets are scattered onto your bale. And then we're going to take a pitchfork and we're going to drive that in a few inches. So not only when I scatter it even across, you're going to use a pitchfork or a bale fork or a potato fork, and we're going to kind of knife it in and drop it in and then get it wet. And it talks about that decomposition as exothermic process, which means that substantial heat is released when the fresh straw is broken down. So it's going to get warm. You can use a thermometer. I have a soil thermometer or a bale thermometer that we can use at the extension office. You can borrow that you can check to see how that temperature goes up over a 2-week time. It definitely will do that. And so that's really good. And also the heat. So the heat and that breaking down of that fertilizer and the water that's added every day for 14 days really is going to get things warm. And so it's basically, it's the breakdown process similar to the composting process in the end. So you will see, like this said, they can be repeated at regular intervals until a substantial temperature change or spike is no longer detected several inches deep. So generally a bale is ready to be planted when the temperature remains fairly constant at a depth of about 4 inches deep. So your soil thermometer is a great little tool for that as well. So you can plant your fertilizer in rows, as if you're going to plant things in rows in the bed. You can just plant a strip of that fertilizer, so you're making a band, or you can just general broadcast it in. And so that's not going to take too much problem. But we have a video from Oklahoma State Extension I'm going to show here in a minute that'll show you about how to prepare that. So it works out pretty good. But basically, you're going to water it and keep on adding some diluted water-soluble fertilizer, such as Miracle Grow, that you're going to water it. So think about watering like a hanging basket. You're going to water your bale in the same way with fertilizer water, and that will help out. So that explains it. Weed control is fairly simple. You literally just pull it and toss. That's why it's important to use clean straw or clean hay. And as it emerges, you can just pull it up and take it out. So usually we do not have too many problems with insects, and it works out pretty good. And the longevity is usually for a good season, and at the end of the season, after it's decomposed, went through decomposition throughout the whole year, you can literally till it in or fork it into your garden. So that's great. So this is just that short little publication, and I'm going to show you the video on how to prep that. So can everyone see the video here on the screen? Please let me know. Can everyone see it?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
you can see it? You see it big enough? Okay, so I'm going to turn it on and I'm going to shut up and you guys can listen to the video, but this is one of the Oklahoma State Extension educators that's going to talk about how to do this, and she's going to show you specifically how this works. So I will widescreen this so everyone can see a little bit better. So here you go.
Are you tired of fighting with poor garden soil? Or perhaps you live in a temporary situation where you don't want to invest in building a raised bed? Well, we may have a solution for you if that's the case, and this is called straw bale gardening. Basically, it's planting in straw bales. Typically, straw bales are preferred over hay bales because they have less weed seeds. Now, they still may have some weed seeds, but they have fewer weed seeds in them. You can see here we have 8 straw bales, and you want to place them up on the end. So the twine is actually going around the bale, and what traditionally would be the long side of the straw bale is actually going to be our top side. So this is so we can have plenty of space to plant in. You want to make sure to keep them twined up or whether it's wire or twine, keep them attached because that's what's going to hold that bale together. Now, if you have new bells, there's a process that we need to do called conditioning these bells, and that's going to take about 14 days. If you're planting this as a warm season crop in mid-April, you're going to want to start this process towards the end of March or the beginning of April so that you're ready to plant as soon as possible. When we condition these straw bells, what we're doing is we're starting a process of decomposition. You can see straw bells are made of a lot of straw and carbon material. And basically, if we don't condition them prior to planting, any fertilizer or nutrients that we add to this, the microbes are going to tie it up immediately and not make it available for our plants. So by starting the conditioning process, that's going to start that decomposition and allow there to be some nutrients available for our plants when we plant them. So how do we do that? Again, the conditioning process takes about 14 days, and what you're going to do is every other day for 14 days, you're going to spread some urea or high nitrogen fertilizer across the top of the bale of straw. While you're applying the high nitrogen fertilizer every other day for 14 days, you want to make sure to water your straw bales every day for 14 days. Now that we've got our bells nice and soaked, and you do want to soak them thoroughly because you want to help get that nitrogen fertilizer down into that bale of hay or straw. Because what you're doing is you're creating that exothermic reaction of decomposition. So we're going to start breaking down that organic straw material with that nitrogen fertilizer. Now, in this process, the straw bales are going to heat up over those 14 days. And so you can monitor when it heats at heat. You can use soil probes such as what we have here. You can also kind of divide it and push your hand down in there and actually feel a warmer temperature down in the straw bale. It will peak in the 14 days, and then usually around the 14th day, it'll start cooling off. And at this point, you know that reaction has taken place. Your straw bale is starting to decompose, and so any additional fertilizer that you apply on your straw bale won't necessarily be completely tied up by those microbes. So at this point, then we can start planting. So for now, we've got our straw bales started, and we'll come back and water them every day for 14 days, and we'll fertilize them every other day for 14 days. For more information on how to start a straw bale garden or what you can plant in one, check out this fact sheet.
We hope you enjoyed this video as part of our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. You can also find even more videos on OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel. And join us on social media for great gardening tips, photos, and discussion.
So I thought that was a pretty good little video to explain some of those contents about how we're going to feed that bale for 14 days. And so you're going to basically scatter it on like a salt shaker, and then you're going to water it, and you're going to water it every day and feed it more fertilizer. And you could see how that decomposed when you open that bale up when they're putting those tomatoes in. So this is a great way to do tomatoes. It's a great way to do vine crops. And especially if you don't want to bend clear down to pick up a vine crop or beans, that's a great way to raise those crops that either can trellis really good. You're just going to have to make sure you're going to manage the watering a little different when you're going to keep that straw bale moist, that environment moist, so especially your fleshy crops can grow. And as something for like potatoes, when people raise potatoes in those beds, they can raise them, and then when they're done, you just split that bale open and you harvest the potatoes out there, and then you have most of that bale has been composted down. So you got compost. So it's really a win-win type of experiment. So I wanted to show you this, and our group did ask about looking at straw bale gardens, and I wanted to show you the video that also matched the publication from Oklahoma. And it's something that's in our region that is very pertinent to what we have because of the acres of wheat raised here, where we would have access to straw or clean prairie hay, or even later cutting alfalfa, because we do have problems sometimes with blister beetles here in Nebraska, depending on the year, and maybe it's not safe to use it for livestock feed because of the blister beetle content, but it is safe to definitely grow a vegetable crop in. So definitely something to give a try. So our next piece that I'm going to share with you tonight is our publication on container gardening. And this is the Container Vegetable Gardening Neb Guide that I helped write with Terry James, who's our state coordinator. And we can do lots of different types of gardening here. You can do lots of different sizes of containers. So if you want to do a shallow, small bowl to raise microgreens, or for lettuce or spinach, clear up to raising your indeterminate tomato plant that's going to need a big cage, you can do that with container gardening. And it's awesome for people who don't have a lot of space. Maybe they don't want to tear up a whole entire garden. Maybe they don't have the ability to because they're renters and they just want to be able to have something and they can have it in a container garden. It's a great way to do that. So we have all different types of materials that we can use for container gardening. The biggest thing is you need to have enough size for the plants that you're going to raise. So if you're going to raise a tomato, especially one of the big indeterminate tomatoes, like an Arkansas Traveler, like we were talking about at break, that's going to keep growing, it's a vining tomato that's going to keep growing till frost, then you need a big tub. And I will show you that here in a minute. But the biggest thing is to have enough of a container to supply the space for the root zone and to keep that root zone hydrated throughout the season. And that's really important. We want to make sure that we have drain holes. You can also equip your container with drip line. So, and here's some examples where they put drip line in here that can literally drip, or you can drape a sucker hose at the base of a plant and just let it drain and give it a drink on a regular basis is really important. For potting media, it is best to use potting soil, but when we are with a heavy crop, so if you're going to raise potatoes, or you're going to raise green beans or melons or tomatoes that require a lot of nutrients and a lot of weight, because as these crops get bigger, they're going to tend to get top heavy. So it's best to add some field soil, some good quality topsoil along with potting soil and mix that in. That's really important to do. If you use nothing but potting mix, which is mostly sphagnum peat moss, you're going to constantly water. You're going to have to water that container on a regular basis, daily, sometimes twice a day or 3 times a day, to keep that material hydrated so the plants don't dry out. That's really, really important. If you add some good quality topsoil or compost or some rotted manure at the beginning of the season, that helps buffer a little bit more and helps reduce the drying out process in your container, because your container has the sides. The sides are going to warm up, and as that warms up, the potting mix or your mix of soil can pull away from the sides of the container and then become hydrophobic, meaning it's not going to infiltrate water. And if you've ever seen a pot where the potting mix is pulled away from the sides and you try to water it, the water hits the top of the potting soil at the base of the plant and runs down the side. It doesn't pull it in, and it's not available for the plant materials. So it's really important to do that. So if you're using strictly potting soil, soilless potting soil, which is mostly peat moss, you're going to have to keep that moisture consistent on a regular basis. The bigger the container, the more buffering you have. The smaller the container, the easier it is for that heat to come in the sides and the bottom and infiltrate to the center. So it's really important. So it's also important if you have top heavy crops, such as that indeterminate vining tomato, that you have enough weight at the bottom that it's not going to tip over. And if you have something that's going to vine or you're using trellising, it has to be staked and caged down so the container doesn't fall over. It's really important to do that. The next section is on fertilizing and using slow release fertilizers. That is called non-water soluble source fertilizer, where it's going to give a little bit of the fertilizer to break down over time. Fast release or water soluble, like the urea example in our video from Oklahoma State, is what we call a fast release fertilizer, meaning once you get it wet, those nutrients are going to break down and they're available immediately. It's always best to have some good balanced slow release fertilizer so you're constantly feeding, instead of having a lot of fertilizer at one time and then nothing, and then another hit of fertilizer again and then nothing. It's always good to keep your soil moisture and your fertility level at a constant level for peak plant production, and then also to spur it to go in to production itself. So growth then makes the transition into producing the produce that you desire. So you can buy lots of different types of slow release fertilizer, different formulations. You need to look at the percentages. Once again, those 3 numbers. So our example in our NEP guide is 10, 10, 10, which means it's 10% each of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So that works great. Or 14, 14, 14. You can buy greenhouse grade water fertilizer where you have the granules that you mix in with water and it'll have the different formulations. But the example that we talk about is a half of a tablespoon per gallon of water. And a milk jug is perfect for that, for those small containers. So we want to make sure that we are fertilizing with that. Or you can do the pelleted fertilizer and you add into your container based on the size of your container and then keep it hydrated and it'll break down over time. So it's always good to follow the label instructions and how much we hear about the tomatoes that get over fertilized and you get this wonderful plant that keeps on growing and keeps on setting blossoms that never produces fruit. And that is because the plant is still in a plant growth stage mode and does not transition over into production. And that's easy to do when we over fertilize vegetable crops, especially tomatoes. And so we talk about tomato trees showing up in the garden and people are upset why their tomatoes aren't setting. So the Miracle-Gro ads can be a little deceptive, and as master gardeners, remember the label is the law in the state of Nebraska. It is a legal document and we cannot recommend a higher fertilizer rate than what is on the package, on the label. You can cut a rate down and that is perfectly fine. You can cut a rate down, but you cannot recommend over usage beyond what is on the label. So if you hear me say the label is the law, that's what that refers to, is that we always recommend no more than what is on the label of that product. So we need to make sure that we are fertilizing on a regular basis for 8 to 10 weeks during the growing season. So we need to keep that going so we have plenty of nutrients for those plants to sustain their growth, to sustain their viability, and also the ability to set on produce, whatever form of produce that is. So it is important. Another piece in this bottom paragraph of fertilizing, over application can burn plant roots and kill the plant. So the adage of a little bit does well, a whole lot does better, does not apply in this case. Really important. It's also really important that we keep, like we said, our soil moisture consistent. We want to make sure that it's moist but not soggy. It really does not help us to go from a soggy container to one that goes bone dry to one that's soggy again. We want to keep it nice and even. This is really important for a crop such as tomatoes or peppers that get blossom end rot. And that is a type of potassium. You will see in garden centers where you'll get these items that are potassium supplements that will supposedly fix blossom end rot. The important thing with blossom end rot is our soils generally are very adequate with potassium. If you add field soil in your container or topsoil and mix it in with your peat moss, you will probably have adequate potassium in your mix. It's important to keep that water moisture level consistent in your mix so those nutrients are available. So when you let things dry out and you have tomatoes developing, it shouldn't be a surprise when you see that scaly brown patch form on the bottom of the tomato plants. And it's really easy to do in a container because, once again, remember, the container is not a buffer anymore. The container is above ground, and so we're getting heat from the top and the sides and the bottom. So it's always good to keep that moisture level consistent where that potassium is available for us. Sunlight, we need a minimum of 8 hours for almost all crops. 6 hours is the bare minimum. But we can have them on the edge of a shady environment where it gets some shade, but it really needs to get full sun. Most of our vegetable and our herb crops like full sun, meaning that full 8 hours. So here's some information more about watering and making sure that we check the moisture level with our fingers. is really important here once again. It is also important that we talk about hydrogels. How many of you have seen potting soil or potting mix, soilless potting mix, with those little kind of opaque cream colored dots, or they call it moisture control potting soil? Okay, those are out there. Those are those little hydrogels. And those are helpful as long as the potting mix stays somewhat moist. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult to rehydrate those potting mixes with those hydrogels in them. Once they get too dry, there's kind of a point of no return that we want to avoid. So we always want to make sure that there's consistent moisture for those hydrogels to stay active. And that's one thing that gives some people a false sense of security on, oh, well, it's water control or moisture control, and that's a problem. You still have to keep the soil moist.
Just a tip, if you're gonna use that soil, fill your container and water it real well before you plant. I didn't do that one year, and I planted and then watered, and it swelled up like an ice cream cone and spilled over the sides.
We did have a comment from one of the master gardeners in the room that if you use that type of potting mix to completely water the area, water that potting soil completely, because with the hydrogels, it will swell. And if you have your container really full, it could swell to the point where it spills out over your containers. So always think about that. Always wet your potting mix really well, whether it has hydrogels or not. But it's really important with the hydrogels to keep it from coming out like a pan of rice. I apologize, a scratchy throat here. Also really good to add lots of mulch in the base of your plant, especially those that can dry out really quick. Really important with any of your vine crops. And it's really important to have with your tomatoes and peppers because it does help keep the soil moisture a little cooler. It still does not give you complete protection from the sun, but it does help buffer a little bit. You still have to check the moisture on a regular basis daily and then water accordingly. So remember, not too wet, but not dry, because it will dry out very quickly. And on those really dry days, on some of those smaller containers, it would probably be wise to water a couple times a day, especially if that's sitting on a patio or around a lot of concrete where it's going to get warm. So it's very important to do that. Here are some varieties that we have available that work for our vegetables in containers. We have more and more vegetable varieties available that are suited for containers. And if you look at seed catalogs or seed displays, they will say if they are ideal for container gardening, or you can buy the starts. So some varieties, if you buy the plant transplants, they'll say that they're optimal for container gardens. But this gives you an idea of some of them that are available. But the All-American Selections for vegetable trials has a whole section of vegetable cultivars that are designed for container gardens specifically. So that is really neat. That's the bottom of this NEB guide. So when we're done, it's always good to take out all your plant material, compost it if it's healthy plant material and not diseased. If it's diseased, we do not compost it. It's always a good idea to change out at least half of your potting soil, if not replace it all. I use several mineral lick tubs that we get cattle mineral in, and I rotate my crops, my family. It's important that you don't raise tomatoes each and every year in that container. And there's a very good reason why. Tomatoes, potatoes, eggplants, and green and peppers all are in the nightshade family called Solanaceae. And the more times we consistently grow something out of that family in that container year after year after year, we can get blight and we can get some wilts built up. from having that crop family present in the container each year. So what I do is I have 5 big containers and I rotate where that family has been. So my tomatoes were in the container the year before, and last year I planted onions. I planted a completely different crop in my container from the year before to break up some of those cycles. So it's always important to rotate the crops that are in your containers, just like you would in your garden. And we can share that information here. There's a publication from Penn State that I can show you that tells you about how to rotate those crops. But it's always good to add in, maybe you want to raise some green beans in your containers. That's a great crop to follow your tomatoes and pepper family. That helps break it up. You also have the added benefit of adding some nitrogen back into those containers because it is a legume. So it's a nitrogen fixer, bringing nitrogen naturally into the soil. Peas will do the same thing. So if you want to raise sugar snap peas, for instance, you can raise a spring crop and a fall crop of fall peas, and you're getting not only you're getting to enjoy sugar snap peas, but you're getting the nitrogen built in. So there's different things you can do strategy wise to share that out. That's really important. So while I'm thinking about it, let's show you that Penn State publication. And I will post this, our email. I apologize for the froggy. It is recommended to know the different families and what they are good for and what they benefit from. And this is a really helpful NEBGA or publication that shows you examples of where we can rotate these families. So Fabaceae is the legume family where your peas and beans come from, and they will add nitrogen to the soil. Liliaceae is your onion and your chives and your garlic family. That's why your onions look sometimes like a flower bulb. They're in the same family. They're in the lily family. They are heavy users of potassium, for instance. That's not a problem for our natural topsoil or garden soils here in this region, because in general, our soils are very high in potassium. But those are good little pieces of knowledge to know and to understand. And so it talks about what plants are in the families. So this is your big crop. Solanaceae. This is the #1 vegetable crop in the United States. This is the one, if anyone grows anything into their garden, we're going to grow tomatoes, right? But we can't grow tomatoes all the time. So we got to rotate them with something else. So the other plants in this family that are bedding plants are petunias and million bells. So that's a good thing to know. And the weeds are nightshade, jimson weed, henbane, ground cherries, buffalo burrs, and horse nettles. So this also tells you which weeds are in this family. Your brassicas are basically what we call our cole crops or our crucifers, or you'll hear about the mustard family. So horseradish, cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, kohlrabi, Chinese cabbage, radishes, mustard, collards, watercress, bok choy, and rutabagas. So this is that big cole crop family that you can grow a spring crop and a fall crop very easily in. So maybe you want to start with raising something that you can harvest in the spring. Maybe you want a short planting of lettuces or spinach. Cut that out, harvest it, and then replant a fall crop for our herbaceous ornamental plants, stock, which is a flowering plant that we put in flower arrangements. Alyssum and candy tuft are in this family. And then the weeds are shepherd's purse, field pennycress, and the yellow rocket. Cucurbitae, this is your melons, your cukes and your melons, zucchinis, winter squash. So what you can do is you can intentionally, in this case, where I have multiple containers, I can rotate the crop by family and I can pick which ones I want. Knowing that our Solanaceae family, for instance, pulls lots of nutrients out, it's probably good to follow with Fabaceae, our peas and our beans, our lentils, garbanzo beans, all of those are great ones, examples to rotate in. So we're doing crop rotation in our containers as well as our traditional gardens. So this is a great way to give you a visual example of which vegetable crops fall in where. Kind of interesting, the rose family has a lot of your fruit, for example. And why sometimes the apples give kind of a rose scent, smells like cut roses, because they're in the same family, same strain. Poaceae are your grains. You can use rye, for instance, as a cover crop. You can use barley as a cover crop. You can plant wheat in the fall and let it be like a winter wheat. And then you can use it as a green manure, till it up and use it in your container and plant your stuff in later. So that's great. So lots of great stuff. Your lily family are your onions, your leeks, your asparagus, and your shallots. Lamiaceae, those are pretty much your mint family. A lot of your herbs that are common. Ericaceae are the cranberries and the blueberries, which we have a horrible time raising here because they use a very high acidic soil that we just don't have. The goosefoot family is spinach, beets, chard, and sugar beets. Apiaceae is your carrot, celery, dill, chervil, cilantro, parsley. So we have some vegetables and some herbs in that family. That's a good family to rotate in. And then Asteraceae is your big flower family. This is the sunflower family, largest flower family that we use here. Huge, huge one. And it has a worksheet in here. So, and space for you to write in where these different publications are available. And then you can make your own rotation. And we have a rotation going in our food pantry garden here at North Platte that we raise for the food pantry. So we're incorporating these rotations in an in-ground vegetable garden, but you can also use that for your personal container gardens as well. So it's a very good idea. So I'm going to stop share and I'm going to turn on the lights here and then you can see me. I'm going to show you a couple containers. And I apologize for the froggy voice. So I'm gonna bring my container up here. One thing we can do is we can use a bucket, garden bucket. These are from Tractor Supply. These are food grade. They are easy to purchase. They have not been used for any other function than for in this case food production. So it's good to avoid chemical or pesticide buckets and buy a food grade container. and I literally took a drill and I drilled holes in here for the water to come out. Before I plant anything though, I'm going to take paper like old newsprint or old coffee filters, or you can use paper towels. I'm going to place that in the bottom of the bucket or the container, and then I'm going to add my soil mix, whatever that may be. The reason why is this reduces extra runout. This helps hold some moisture in. So that's one way to keep it from constantly leaching things out. We water at the base of the base of the plants at the bottom. We never overhead water to reduce blight problems. We water and we water until the water comes out the container. That means we have watered the whole volume of the container. So something like this is really good for small vegetables. This would be good for one pepper plant. Or you could raise peas in here with the small little cage, the little small cheap cages that you can raise from the box stores, and they can vine up. Or if you green beans, you can do patio cucumbers in here, the small guys. So this is good. You can use the miniature tomatoes. There are some really small tomatoes that are quite tiny that can go in here. Do not plant a vining indeterminate tomato in here. It's not big enough. So it's always good to know how much capacity you have. So when you get your seeds out or your transplants, look and see how much space is required to know how much you can plant in a container. That will dictate how much you can put in here. So this is great for herbs. This is great to make your own herb pot. You can pick it up, you can take it in for the winter. You can revive it, keep it alive under a shop light, bring it back out for the next year. You can raise greens in here, and you can constantly pick at it throughout the season. My coworker has a lettuce pot. I showed him how to raise his own lettuce and spinach for his smoothies. He cuts that off and he has them growing under a grow light. Works perfect. So also this would be very good for carrots. You can let carrots or radishes grow, pull them up, you can replant them right back, no problem. So you can have multiple crops going in just a simple bucket. We did this, we put the N Extension logo on it for a specific school project last year. And I will make gardening kits available once again, but for the general public to purchase. And I will help people start their own beginning vegetable garden. Look for that in your email on publicity, but I will show people how to get started with their own vegetable garden. They've never vegetable garden before. Get you started with your seed, your soil, and your instructions. So that's the garden bucket, but you can use other containers that are plastic or terracotta or ceramic. Remember that the heat's going to come in on the sides and it's going to get warm. So we don't have the buffering of the soil all the way around it. So it's going to get really warm on us. And if we're working with terracotta drives more heat into the side and dries out even quicker. So we're going to water a little bit more closely with terracotta than we would plastic or even glazed ceramic, because you will have water loss out on the sides, especially with terracotta. So that's one example. And the other example is not too fancy, but it works. This is what we call a lick tub, a mineral tub for cattle mineral that has been used out in the pastures. And we have lots of these tubs out at the UNL beef unit here. And this is one that you can raise a bag of seed potatoes in. And you can grow that bag of seed potatoes and you can harvest it. Just know that it's in that solanaceous family. And when it's done, plant something different in it the next season. Or when the potatoes are done, maybe you want a short crop. Maybe you want some radishes. Maybe you want some short season carrots. Maybe you want some lettuce. Maybe you want some peas. And peas grow really well in the fall, and then you get the boosted nitrogen after. You can get an extra crop out once the potatoes are done. If you do a tomato, for instance, it's going to be there clear till frost. So you're going to dedicate this pot towards that tomato clear till the killing frost and it's done. But when you have a container like this, you still need to have the drill holes, or in this case, the bottom cracked, and that's fine because the water is going to come out. I still throw newsprint or a set of paper towels or napkins or something in the bottom to keep that water from just running out all the time. We want to see some water seeping out, but we don't want to lose all that moisture so fast. So it's important to have the drain hole, but we don't want it to drain so fast that there's nothing left. So that's really important. And when you get something that's big, that's tall, like a big indeterminate heirloom tomato, for instance, it's going to need a very strong cage, and it's going to probably have to have some stakes driven into the ground to hold it in its place, because I raised an Arkansas Traveler last year, tried a new variety for me, and it was fabulous. It was a wonderful tomato, but I had to have 3 big stakes and a cage to hold it up. So that's something to learn about. And you can use what we call a determinate tomato. A determinate variety would be like Celebrity, where it's going to grow up to a determined height and it's going to stop. So then it's done. And those are a little bit easier to manage. You're still going to need to cage them, but it still works good. These pots were really good. We were growing bok choy in here in these pots a couple years ago, and we had several of them growing, and you can literally cut them up, cut them off, harvest them, plant something else. So you can add crops in based on the time you have left. So maybe your bok choy is done. You could do green beans in here and have a family meal and then some of green beans for the fall season. That's perfect, because we plant green beans in July here, so they have the chance to grow. And when you harvest those beans in the fall, they have a lot of good sweet flavor. Any questions on the containers? So we have the tub. You can go on your local Facebook buy, sell, or trade pages, or your local community calendar announcements on the local radio station. You can buy these from farmers and ranchers fairly easy, and they're a great way to garden.
Some of the recycling centers have them too.
If you go to recycling centers, sometimes they show up there as well. So they're very versatile.
I have a question,
Yes.
David. I've been using those Purina pots for several years in our
Yes.
community garden. And do you recommend replacing the potting soil each year?
I would do half.
Okay,
I would recommend changing out half of it, adding some new good quality compost to it, or if you have some aged manure from a good source, you can use hog, or do not use hog manure. Hog manure is not okay to use because their digestive system is much like human, and it passes E. coli and the bad E. coli and salmonella easier than our ruminants. So
okay,
cow, horse, goat, sheep, hog, or chickens, poultry litter, and rabbits are all good. Just avoid the hog manure.
do you have a favorite potting mix you could recommend?
I don't really spend a fancy amount on potting mix. You can buy the fancy expensive stuff. I usually I've used Hyponex, I've used some of the Menards grade. That's perfectly fine. And then I'm going to doctor it up by adding the compost back, some good topsoil and some rotted manure, and it works out great. Also some straw. It helps bring a mix. So you got some peat moss, you've got some topsoil, you've got some manure. And so you need to do that early in the season.
I have made my own, buying just bales of peat moss and then putting about a third peat moss, a third compost, and a third of my regular garden soil, you know.
One of our master gardeners uses a mix of 1/3 peat, 1/3 topsoil, and 1/3 compost. So,
Okay, thank you.
So that's good. To mix it up and bring in fresh. And keep the weeds out of it. So if you're done with the garden season and weeds pop up, get them pulled before they go to seed and drop more weeds back in your containers. So that's just a really quick piece of information on the container gardens. And then I was going to show you some information on raised beds. And I was going to share you publication from Colorado State Extension. And I will share this with you as well as the Penn State one tomorrow. It is an excellent one to have. So when we talk about raised beds, we can have raised beds in blocks. And I have a little example here. This is a little cheap little container that I bought at a dollar store here in town. And to demonstrate it, when we do a raised bed, we're going to bring it up off the ground. And we want to make sure that the width is no wider than someone being able to reach over halfway across. You need to at least be able to reach halfway across from one side to the next on the garden. And you can do a lot of neat things with a raised bed where you can use your space wisely depending on which crops you have. So for instance, I got this floral mesh here. So if I have a tomato, I'm going to put this toothpick in here knowing that that's going to take quite a bit of the size of my garden right here. And I've got to measure how wide and how tall that plant is and how much is left in my raised bed for other crops. But there are other things that I can space. We can do block spacing or we can do rows. Block spacing is where we are literally putting things in a block. So I'm using my example here. So maybe I want to do onion bulbs. So I'm going to raise them in a block and I'm going to set them up to look like something like this. So we got the spacing out here just like the Colorado publication. Can you see that? And here on the example, it shows how you can space out different crops. So like carrots, you have them spaced out, works out really good. It maximizes the amount of space you need. So this picture here of the greens, the different types of spinach and then celery and lettuce, you can block all those by different varieties and really utilize your space as good as possible, because as plants cover each other up, if they touch and overlap a little bit, it keeps your soil cooler and it also keeps weeds from sprouting because of the shading effect of the crops. So in this case, that's why our Swiss chard here and our lettuce, our red lettuce looks great, because it's being moist, it's being watered, because you're gonna have to water it and watch it like a container. But you also have that spacing where those leaves are overlapping a little bit that keeps down your pests, your weed pests. So it's really handy. This is an example that Colorado State used that I thought was excellent, that shows you what you can do with this compressed row spacing to utilize as much of your garden as possible. And they've really got it layered out by each crop. Just know that some of these are going to take more space than others. So you're only going to get 4 rows of parsnips in a 6 by 6, but you can do a lot of carrots. Look at that. Or your beets. Beets are going to need more space based off of how big those beets are going to get and how you need to space them apart. So that works out excellent. So I thought this was a great little handy set of recommendations for you, and I will send it out for you to do. And it also talks about planting by vegetable crop. So of course, we talked about the cole crops, which are brassicas. So we're going to plant them as a group in the garden, and we're going to move them as a group in the garden each year. And so it always talks about corn, talks about eggplants and peppers, remember, are relatives in that family that has to move all the time. Potatoes are the same way. Our vine crops are excellent in the sense that we can put them in cages, or we can put trellising up and you can grow vertically. So you can plant them so they just don't vine over and take over most of the garden. They can go up. So that's really awesome. And that can be really handy. We used hog panels in the past here for those crops to grow up. And that's what we're called vertical gardening. And you can vertical garden in a raised bed. You can also, of course, trellis your tomatoes and cucumbers, peas and beans. Your peas and your beans are in the same family once again. So you will rotate them as a family down the garden, and usually following your tomatoes, your peppers, your eggplants, and your potatoes. But this is a really good way of knowing your families and how to space them and get the most out of your space, whether you are in a raised bed where you have the sides up above, the garden space itself is above the soil surface, or in an in-ground garden space. So that's one of the best ways to show people how to do the raised bed. Because we want to space it so the foliage overlaps each other a little bit, keeps the soil temperature down, because remember, we don't have a buffer anymore. It's going to heat up on the sides and the top. You can also do more with reducing soil compaction. Instead of tilling, you have a potato fork or a pitchfork where you're stirring the soil each season and adding nutrients based off of your soil test results, which is another topic for another day. And you can also do your early plantings and later plantings. You can also do frost protection in a raised bed where you can use the gauzy type of material with the metal hoops, and then you put the frost protection low tunnel material that'll keep the tomatoes and the peppers, all those warm crops, warm a couple degrees enough to keep them from frosting. That same material, that gauzy type material, is great to put over your broccoli and your cauliflower and your cabbage to keep the cabbage moth from laying its eggs on the produce. So not only can you grow those crops under the gauzy material of a floating row cover, which looks like dryer sheet material, you can also use that same material to keep those other tender crops warm when it comes to fall. And it's easier to incorporate more nutrients into your garden as a raised bed. Just know that you're going to check your moisture on a regular basis. It's good to mulch at the base of all your plants. And so you can bring in healthy straw or compost around the base of the plants and let them grow, along with your coverage from your foliage helps get rid of your weeds. So it's really a win-win. This publication talks about the size and the depth that you need to go and your variations of how high. So 4, 6, or 8 or 10 inches tall. Some crops, some of your gardens can grow as tall as 12 inches tall. That usually is pretty much the effective rooting zone for at least a tomato is 12 inches tall. And it's good to have that. You can also have varied types of gardens that are raised. So they can be on rollers. We've have gardens that are gardening plans that are on rollers where the beds can roll around, where people can literally have a folding chair right by, or their walker right by, or their wheelchair. That's more enabling, and also makes that garden portable so it can be moved in from one room to another or one building to another. So it works out great. It's always good to orient your crops north-south to catch the sun in the morning and in the evening. If you do sweet corn, for instance, in the garden, remember the shading effect from the sweet corn over time is going to cast a shadow on the other stuff. So know where your crops are oriented with the sun and if they're going to get enough sun for the growing season. Construction materials, you can use treated lumber now. It is now safe. It doesn't have the chemicals that were potentially toxic like in the past. Always avoid using rare timbers. If you do, you need to use a plastic layer on the inside to keep everything bedded down and have a protective layer so the creosote does not soak into the soils. So there's way more information that you can do on here. We talk about double digging and adding your organic matter. Fall is always optimal along with early spring. So you have a good, healthy environment to grow into each and every year for either for the next year at the fall or you're doing it early in the spring. So this is great to get started and get people talking and get people excited about gardening. So I will send this information to you on your email. And this is the last picture of the frost protection where they had the hoop system over and they put plastic, polyethylene plastic that creates what we call a low tunnel, which will keep those cool crops or those warm crops protected during a freeze. And we've had tomatoes here in North Platte producing clear through Thanksgiving in our high tunnel. So if you like to raise vegetables clear past frost, we've also had cabbage available at late November too, depending on the year. But if we add those hoops and that protective material, whether it be the gauzy fabric or the polyethylene plastic, you can grow clear through the year and you can also start earlier in the year too.
David,
Any questions?
I have a question. Would you not include some flowers that would draw the pollinators in your raised beds of vegetables?
Yes, sure can. You sure can. Those would be good.
The raised beds usually warm up faster in the spring.
Yeah.
Start planting.
And that's the nice thing is the raised beds do get warm quicker than a traditional garden bed. So you can plant quicker as well. It's always good to add some herbs in there, except for the mint family. The mint family it'll be everywhere. So a lot of your other herbs will attract insects that are beneficial along with your sunflowers. So that's something to think about as well. Okay. We had a comment here on chat. Come on, chat. Any more questions that you may have had? I'm going to stop share.
Actually, I have one more. I
Sure.
also have big tubs that I grow in, and I remove 1/2 to 1/3 of the soil. But it occurred to me, should I be putting the total contents of the tub in a wheelbarrow or a tarp and mixing that stuff together so the top of what's in the pot gets mixed with what's in the bottom of the pot, remove half of that and then mix the new stuff in?
Yes. Yes, you want to incorporate that in.
Yeah.
Good. Very good idea. And then you can use the other half that hasn't been used for the next container, adding, you know,
I do that, but it occurred to me, sometimes I'm tired and I only take the top half.
sure.
I better review that policy. Yeah.
Yeah, mix her up.
Okay.
Any other questions? I am sorry, it is 9:30 here, Central Time. This took quite a bit, but we talked about quite a bit. And there's more information to share and to give to you. So if you have any more questions, just let me know. I am happy to share that. Ask questions, and that's what we're here for. Any
Thanks, David.
questions?
Good session.
You're welcome. I'm just glad to see everyone on here. Thank you for hanging out with me. We had a lot of things to cover, and I wanted to kind of show you kind of the show and tell. This is kind of the format we're going to go with. There are more hands-on things coming next week on plant morphology, but this is my start to get started, and we'll get that recording ready for you and send it out tomorrow along with your quiz and along with your extra resources. So any more comments?
Thank you very much.
I have a question, if I might.
Sure. Sure.
Talked earlier about the 4600 fertilizer. Where do you get to buy that specialized stuff?
Usually go to your fertilizer plant or your local co-op.
Okay, I'll try the co-op.
You
Okay,
can
thank you.
purchase out there.
Your commercial urea like that, that would have been sterilized or something where there wouldn't be any disease in it, rather than like maybe going out and collecting your own.
Yes. Someone asked about actual urine, and that's a derivative of urea. And when you make commercial fertilizer, that's all been sterilized. So any other questions? I thank you for all hanging in there and asking questions, and lots of good sharing and information. Get us excited. Maybe go get your seeds. Go shop on that catalog or that online website, or go to your local garden center because the seeds are out. So I'm fired up. I hope you are too. So it was a good night. We're all leaving on a happy note, right? So, all right. So we will see you next Tuesday. The copy will be on plant morphology. I will send out material ahead again for you to download and for some instructions. So if you have any questions, you're always welcome to email me or send me a call or a text on the phone, and we'll get you called. So I'm just so glad that we got everyone together, and this is a new experience of having people from a lot of the state and also South Dakota in our groups. So
Thank you.
again,
Thank
and
you.
we'll see you next week. Bye.